big shift in the industry around AI and what's going on. I've got a couple of really experienced guest speakers. Starting off, our CEO and founder over here at Fire Compass. He's deep into this. He's put together a significant offering, and he's a serial cybersecurity entrepreneur and innovator. He was part of a Fortune 40 under 40, and is a frequent speaker at RSA conference, Interop, TEDx, etc. And I've also got our chief offensive security officer for Fire Compass. Very excited to have Meryl here. She's got offensive and cloud security expertise, deep practical experience where she's built and advised red teams, purple teams, AppSec, and security validation programs for large enterprises and regulated industries. She's a MITRE contributor and AWS CIS benchmark author, specializes in translating real attacker behavior into clear technical and executive decisions. So give me just 1 second and catch my breath. Sorry, I ran to the microphone. But want to kick things off. I want to turn it over to Bakash and get a perspective just kind of to set the stage. How are adversaries using AI today? And what shift do you see in the marketplace as you're staring at the problem at hand?
Yeah, that's a great question, Eric. So if we think from the perspective of adversary, or in general, let's look into like what's happening because of AI. Because of AI, a lot of things have become easier or faster. So that's if you look at the entire like the all the stages in terms of either you call kill chain or whatever you would like. Let's look at it from the beginning. Like suppose you have to discover a vulnerability. If you have to discover a vulnerability, earlier we had to fuzz those, do fuzzing and do a lot of analysis manually. Now, a good part of that can be automated right now. A good part of the analysis can be automated. So fuzzing has become faster. Then after you fuzz, then next comes like exploiting. So writing the exploits. So coding has become much faster in certain ways. But when it comes to still complex kind of exploit writing, complex stuff, you still need the humans. And then AI can do certain amount, but still humans play a pretty big role, right? So in both the cases, what has happened is you still need the great human beings, but they have now become much, much faster. So exploit writing has become faster. Then comes like doing reconnaissance, where we go and figure out if there's a vulnerable, which are the assets out there, what are the kind of, based on reconnaissance, which are the soft targets, etc. You can now do recon at scale and analyze those data at scale. So again, things have become faster. But there are a few other things happening over here. It's not just about the speed or the velocity over here when it comes to the analysis. Because of AI, now you can try out a lot of different permutations and combinations, or try out various different creative paths or analysis much, much faster. So one is the velocity, but sometimes because in the early days, without the power of AI, we couldn't have the comprehensiveness of the discovery. So right now, with the power of AI, we can also find some of those edge cases which may not be earlier. It wasn't probably feasible to do that. So recon has become faster. You can find out a lot of those edge cases. Then comes exploitation. Now, when it comes to real exploitation, not exploit writing, which I spoke about, when it comes to exploitation or breaking into, one of the key things is about attack planning. Now, if you look at the previous to like AI coming up, you needed a lot of experience. You needed a lot of experience to think creatively and stuff like that. But now, because of the AI, you can have that experience very easily. You can have that. The AI can suggest you or assist in this attack planning. It can tell you what you can do next. So a lot of the folks who may not be that experienced, now they can find out all these attack paths a lot more easily using AI. So even the exploitation has become faster and also easier, a lot more scalable. Things have become a lot more personalized. If you want to do like social engineering at scale, earlier just doing research on individuals, on organizations, it used to take a lot of time. Now you can do highly personalized, highly crafted attacks. So there's a lot of these changes which are happening because of the kind of quantum shift in AI. So Eric, over to you.
Yeah. Let me have ask a follow-up question here, because I still haven't come across a vulnerability management program that gets into the mediums and the lows. And I've heard you talk about the creativity and putting together, like, I've heard you reference vulnerability chaining and things like that as just an example. I was hoping you could give me a couple of real world examples of how you've seen the hackers not only applying AI and some of the modern technology. I'll expand it beyond just AI, because there's a level of automation beyond that. But what are you seeing out there in the universe? We see a lot of hype around the attacker, but what is their reality today? And what do you think they're going to be capable of, like, fast forward 6, 12, 18 months? Because everything's moving so fast.
Great question. So I'll just go back like some 20 years. So those days, I was doing some research on attack planning. So finding out like multi-stage attack paths, finding out like the different permutations and combinations. The AI in the current form wasn't there. So those days, for a small network with like 50 or 100 systems, doing the comprehensive attack planning was super tough. It was a p-space complete problem. Those who are into algorithmic complexity, it was very, very hard to scale planning, to find out all possible permutations and attack paths, permutations and combinations of paths. Now today, this has become a lot more easier compared to before. And just to give you an example, these are some of the edge cases which a lot of times defenders miss. Like, for example, there could be pre-prod system which you might have, and there's suppose a directory traversal in that. And in the directory, you find out some logs. In the logs, you see some a lot of times you have this base64 encoded stuff. You kind of see that, well, there's some passwords in that. So you get the admin access in the pre-prod. And then you may go and try out that password in some other applications, and you may see that that's working. You may get into the prod, right? Now, if you think of this kind of chaining, like the first vulnerability was directory traversal in a pre-prod. So the asset criticality is medium, maybe, or low, depending on how you classify. The vulnerability, which is directory traversal, is also not a critical one. So if you take these two, these are not something which is going to be kind of surfacing as the top of the focus for in terms of the traditional vulnerability management. But because of the chaining, you can now break into prod. So this kind of attack path analysis at scale, these are the things which the attackers could do. These are the things which also defenders can do. It has just become a lot more scalable or a lot more faster.
Mm-hmm. Got it. That's excellent insight. One of the things that I've seen is in the marketplace is a lot of folks are just struggling to get through, just their annual audit-driven pen test, and they really see the concept of red teaming, which is what you're kind of alluding to, is much more sophisticated attacks and black box, looking at it from the hacker's perspective. That's seemingly a luxury, and I think that's something that we're starting to demystify for our customers. But I want to transition over and talk to Meryl just briefly, and Bikash, please add your 2 cents. But I kind of think of the old movie Ghostbusters, and I want to enter into like a conversation about myth busting, because AI is still relatively new if you think about it, where we are in the footpath in general. But there are companies that are moving very fast in this direction. It's been an epic shift over the last year. But what are some of the common myths that you see out there, and how would you bust them with regard to how we're able to apply AI, specific types of AI, to the challenges associated with offensive security? So bringing it down from being a luxury to making it a reality for people. What are some of the concerns that you hear, or what are the myths that are out there that are kind of flying in the face of that? Maybe Bakash, if you want to start, and then maybe Meryl can weigh in. Bakash?
Yeah. So let's put it as, like, may not be myths, but misconceptions, or my perspectives, or popular conceptions which I might have a different opinion on. So if I put it in that way, so this is not just specific to AI in offensive security, but I see this in general. You will see like different groups of people. One set of people are going to come and say, AI is not so great. It doesn't give the right kind of answers, or I'm not getting what I want. And then there will be another set of folks who will say, like, it's groundbreaking, it's like a tectonic shift and stuff like that. So you may see like two very, very like extreme opinions sometimes. So my perspective is that both are true.
Mm-hmm.
It's not A versus B, but it is A and B. Both are true. And here's the kind of reason. So this is what I'm saying in general for AI. If you are looking for something, if you are seeking something, you will get that. So the answer that you are going to get from AI is going to be what you are looking for, and not always necessarily.
Yeah, so it's almost like a manifestation. Like
Yes.
if I
You
seek
need to know
something,
what you are looking for. If you know what you are looking for, you will get it. And why is it so? Like, that's a high level statement. Like, why is this so? Because of a very simple reason. AI has got a lot of knowledge, but what it doesn't have is the context. It doesn't know your organizational context. It doesn't know your specific scenario well. So how well you know the problem statement is what's going to determine how well will you get the answer. So knowing the problem or defining the problem is not a very easy thing. If you look at engineering courses or academia, we learn how to define a problem during our PhD days, or maybe during the masters and stuff like that. So defining problem, like core hard problems, it's not a very easy thing. Most people are unable to define the problem in the right manner. So I know there's this huge kind of trend of, what is it called, like prompt engineering and stuff like that. I think, I mean, what is more important probably is understanding the problem well. So defining the problem well is what is most important. If you can define the problem very well, you can do very well prompt engineering. And only in that case, you will get very good answers. So what I'm seeing is right now, AI is a very, very powerful tool, but it's like a wrench. I mean, what you get out of it depends on who is handling that, or like a knife. It depends on who is handling that. So it's both true. Both, it is both great and both not so great. So that's one, I mean, maybe popular thought, where I have some perspective.
Well, let me ask you this, because I mean, we talk to a lot of penetration testers, red teamers, and going back to, you know, just what you just stated, a lot of people are concerned that automation is out to take their jobs, or replace the value of an offensive security professional. Where do you see things really going? I know you've talked to Bruce Schneier about this, but what's your perspective on this? Bruce shared his, but what's yours?
So right now, I'm doing a little bit fast forward of some of the things. Maybe we would have spoken later, but let me share a small story, and then I'll give the answer.
Okay.
So we are into like we use agentic AI to automate pen testing and red teaming. A few years back, we were doing the traditional automation. We were also using AI, like the classical AI planning algorithms. Now we do it slightly different with the agentic architecture. Now, if we look at like the results which we were getting 6 months, 12 months back versus right now. So we every time, like we are not every time, but most of the times when we are running pen test or a red team using our AI agents, we have also our researchers trying things manually to see, can we find something more?
Mhm.
So, and we kind of keep the score. So in recent times, we started seeing certain amazing things. In majority of the cases, AI is able to beat the humans. And these are like very smart folks from our research team. And of course, to be on the to be fair with them, like every time they find something new, they train our AI model. So, so we are trying to make the AI better every day, right? So majority of the times they're able to beat the humans. In one of the cases, as an example, like um, uh, we did a test just a few weeks back. That result, human versus AI, was 23-2. So this is a very interesting and startling thing. I know that there are certain things which probably there's a very kind of divided opinion on this, and I'll share my perspective. But here are some data which we have internally. We are now trying to collate those and kind of put it together as a more research and a data-backed, evidence-backed kind of thing. But right now, what I'm telling is more anecdotal. But I'm deep into it. I'm like playing with it, and I'm working on the design and the architecture. So these are anecdotal, but from very deep hands-on experience with what's happening in our case. So if you look at this trend, this is something very, very interesting. So what it means is, you could look at it in two different ways. What it means is that a year from now, the job role which we have for the young pen testers, that role is no longer going to be the same. If a year back at a big four, a young person fresh out of college or maybe a few years experience, they would go through a checklist one by one and try one business logic test or try this specific particular kind of testing. So everybody has their checklist, right? They were going through that. And then I believe we are almost there, if not already there, that you don't need to go through that checklist one by one. So that means 80% of the stuff which you had been doing as a pen tester, and pen testing is a very, very kind of intellectual kind of work, right? And that kind of work is turning into something that 80% of it probably you don't need to do it. So that means what? That means that we should adapt and adopt both with this great change which is happening. So we should be able to use these tools in the right manner. And when we use these tools, this means a different kind of thinking. It needs the ability to define a problem well, is the ability to understand the context very well. So the way we did the learning most of the times in the past 2 decades, I think that there has to be a shift in the learning in which we conceptualize thinking, conceptualize something or thought about something. We need a shift in thinking. So there's definitely going to be a change in 80% of the work that we had been doing. So the role is definitely going to change. Now, there are different groups of people. Some might say like there will be less number of jobs, and some might say that there will be new type of jobs. I believe as a humanity, like as humanity, we have always figured out a way. So it's a great shift. We will figure out a way. Things will be good at the end. But during this phase of change, it's very important that we keep our eyes open, we keep our mind open, we adapt and adopt. And definitely 1 year down the line, things are going to be drastically different.
Yeah, I know from my experience in interacting with customers and people in the marketplace of all size enterprises, the one benefit that I see to a lot of this automation is giving them a little bit more margin or headspace in order to think through some of the more creative attacks and attack paths, like you had mentioned earlier, whether it's multi-stage and so forth, just to go back to that. But one thing that you hear a lot about, so you developed a AI-based attack platform at FireCompass. There's a need for governance with every AI project. I mean, some of the statistics out there, 90% of projects fail. So how does the introduction of an AI-based attack platform, whether it's FireCompass's or hyper automation from some other folks out there, how does that impact the programmatic approach to offensive security? And you could
That's
broaden that into vulnerability management if you want, but for years and years, 2 to 3 decades behind me, I've looked at the IT operations and the cybersecurity space, and I see common trends. A lot of noise, not a lot of signal. And
good question. Mm.
frame it for us.
Yeah, that's a great question. So this 90% projects fail. There's some research, I don't know, maybe 6-9 months back, and then our team also came up, and we had been like intensely investing into AI at that point in time, and showing like, see, 90% projects are failing and stuff like that. Now I'm optimistic by nature. I like looking at the opportunity which is out there, but let's look at this number as a very interesting thing. If you look at what percentage of startups fail, it's not 90%, it's even more. If you look at the seed stage startup to like the real success, even lesser. So anything which is new, if you do 90%, there will be failure. So if we think of any adoption as like the hype cycle in the early days to then later you have the like plateau, and like there's like mass adoption. So if you're adopting something at the late stage when there is mass adoption, then the success rate will be much higher. Early stage, always this is the case. So will 90% projects fail? Probably yes. Do you want to be at the cutting edge of stuff? If it is yes, you got to take that risk. There's no other way. Like we decided to take that risk, and fortunately we have got very good experience, and I believe we have been very successful until now. We also raised a great round of $20 million just a few months back. But here's the question, like, how do you become the 10%? So rather than looking at 90% projects fail, we should think, how can we be the 10% who succeeds? So here's a few things which I probably would like to share. One of the key reasons why startups fail is because they choose the wrong problem. Because nobody cares about that problem, the market is not right, the timing is not right. That's in case of startup. I believe that's true for almost every kind of projects. A lot of times people frame the wrong problem. They pick up a problem which doesn't matter so much. That will be a big reason why a lot of these AI projects fail. And then not having the right kind of people in the project. It's not very easy to have the right kind of people to work in this kind of project. So it's all the usual kind of reasons why these projects could fail. So I would look at this as an opportunity, that how can we beat those 10%? And if you look at like how we implement for our customers, let me share like our ideology, how we make sure that our customers, 100% of our customers are successful. So this is what we do. It's a very simple thing. It's not a rocket science, nothing very big. We make sure that we have a very dedicated customer success team who works with them, who knows our product in and out. So our product, every week there's a new release or there's something new which is happening out there. So having this customer success team very closely connected with the product, and that's how we ensure that a very, very strong customer success team which works with our product as well as with the customer, that's the only way to make it successful. And for us, I can't think of a single customer where the project is not successful, where we couldn't deliver ROI from day 2 or day 3. That's how fast we can deliver ROI. But to make sure, you need to have that kind of strategy. Now, I gave an example of our story, but in your case, you have to choose the right problem, whatever area you are working on. Making sure you have the right team is the usual thing, and you can be in that 10% who succeeds.
Well, it's really interesting. The way that you responded was in the context of startup world or innovation world, and it really carries over into enterprise and how you run the operations inside of organizations. I believe that you've chosen one of the right problems, but maybe you could frame this up with the problem inside of enterprises today, and I'll try to plainly state this. What's broken in the traditional pen test and red team model today, the consulting model, if you will, and why are those outcomes not translating to like cyber resiliency? We can dig into why purple teaming matters or in any of those topics, but what's broken? In other words, what problem have you chosen to attack and solve for? I was literally on a call with someone earlier, private equity backed, very budget constrained, friend of the family, if you will. And, they were looking at a traditional pen test for an application at, let's just give it a range of 25 to 35,000 for a large, defining it, pretty standard stuff. But, Fire Compass comes in at a much lower price point, but coming in at a much lower price point, that's not exactly the point, because we really need to get to frequency. And I tell you that story because that's a common perception that, hey, one application test costs $25,000 to $30,000 for a large application in SOW models. But why don't you tell us what you see as broken in the traditional model today, and maybe dive into how you fix it?
Sure. So Eric, let me not put it as what's broken. Let me put it as what's the gap. And this gap is also an opportunity. I would not say it's broken, but here's the gap and here's the opportunity. See, what has happened is, like, because of this like fast AI adoption, attackers have already adopted AI, and in different pockets they're adopting in a different way. So I see like there are three kind of gaps. The gap in terms of velocity or speed, like if I may put it as 3S, gap in speed. Attackers are now churning out exploits for a new vulnerability which just came out today in 1 or 2 days. So like in 2 days, you have like exploits out there. People are exploiting. Pen test cycle is still like once a year or quarterly and things like that. So that's one velocity gap in speed. There's also a gap in scope, in the sense like people only pen test their core crown jewel applications and stuff like that. Most of them, there are few, maybe very few, who does pen testing on all their applications. So that's the second gap, like where you have the gap in scope, whereas attackers might go after any asset, break into a pre-prod, and then get initial access, do lateral movement from there. And there's also gap in sophistication. And by sophistication, I mean now it is possible to have sophistication at scale. You can find out creative attack paths. You can do multi-stage attacks. Even a fresh person out of college can use these AI tools and do complex attack planning. And if they are like committed to their goal, they may find out some edge case which we may not have looked into, right? So sophistication at scale is possible. That's the other. So these are the kind of three gaps which I see because of the AI. And we saw similar kind of things when the digital revolution happened, right? Like there was this great digital divide. I believe that there is going to be a greater AI divide if we don't adapt, because the digital revolution did not happen so fast. This is the fastest ever thing which has happened in the tech space in the history of our humanity. So those who are not adapting it fast enough, the gap is going to be very huge, and they are going to be super vulnerable. So that's how I see as the gap in speed, scale, or scope, speed and scope, and sophistication at scale. And of course, there's a way to solve, but to answer your question, that's where I see as the gap.
Well, why don't you elaborate a little bit about how you're driving things? How are you solving this end to end? What is the application of AI that's going to help close this gap?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me answer this in a few parts, and this is a little bit about, like, I would say, our philosophy when it comes to testing, or if you call it identifying issues. If you look at the what is it called? The identify, protect, detect, and respond and recover, right? Like you have these 5 capabilities. So if you look at the identify, over there, the way things happen today is like you have a separate network scanning tool, network VA tool. You have a separate ASM tool, which goes and does the reconnaissance. You have a separate DAS tool for application testing, separate SAS tool, and stuff like that. Then you need a set of people to kind of use all these tools, coordinate, and stuff like that. There's some very sophisticated organizations who may have kind of integrated these through APIs and tried to automate. Now, if we look at today's world, the way everybody can be an attacker in today's world, you need to have the complete kind of breadth of testing. You need to have the complete depth of testing, and you have to have a continuous testing. So you need the depth, breadth, and the continuity, all 3 together. Now, if you have to do this at scale, there's no other way apart from automation. Now, if you have to do the automation, you could do the automation of breadth and the continuity using traditional automation. But when it comes to depth, that's the hard problem, and that's something which you can't solve very easily without a very creative mind. And today that creative mind is the AI, right? So that's where AI has come in, and it has made it possible that we can solve all the 3 things together. Earlier, before the AI world, I mean, you could do sophistication, you could do hyper personalization, but you could not do it at scale. You could do depth. You get the best of the red teamers and pay $100,000 and do a great red teaming, but that was not scalable. So today, this is the first time in the world that you can have sophistication at scale. So that means sophistication of everything at scale. You can do sophistication of pen testing at scale. You can do business logic testing at scale. You can do sophistication of propaganda at scale. You can do personalized social engineering at scale, right? So that's what has happened. So if you look at what we have done at FireCompass is we believe that we need a single platform. You can't have all these things separate in silos, because then you can't have the intelligence of each of these combining together. So we have this single offensive security platform where we already had these things beforehand. So it was easier for us to kind of put everything together. Like we have the reconnaissance engine goes and discovers all these assets. We have the infrastructure pen testing capability, the application pen testing capability. And for application pen testing, we have both the authenticated and unauthenticated. And then we have the objective-based red teaming. Now, in a single platform, we have all these capabilities, and we have the AI orchestrator, which remembers things, which knows the context, and we can do this kind of sophisticated testing at scale. And last but not the least, is very important, we also need the humans. So we also have another capability of PTAS, which is pen test as a service. It's optional, where you can also have the human layer. And we have a team of experts in-house, but we also work with a lot of consulting companies. We have some of the largest, like majority of the big 4, I mean, they work with us. Some of the largest consulting companies in the world, they work with us. So we also need the humans. So this is what I believe in, that the future is not of a RoboCop, but the future is that of Iron Man. So it's not RoboCop, but Iron Man. It's about man and machine combining together in a smart manner.
I feel like we need Ozzy Osbourne's Iron Man as some theme music playing in the background, but we don't have that right now. So you've shared a really cool perspective. I mean, we've been on this journey just in this discussion, talked about the shift that's happened in the marketplace, how hackers are using modern technology, that AI shift, if you will. Talked a little bit about myths, talked about the gap that you saw for, and now you shared how. But one burning question for me. So what do we do with all this information? If I'm a CISO at a large retailer or financial services organization or a mid-sized business, anywhere in the world, I've got applications that I've never tested. I've got infrastructure that I test once a year, maybe twice a year, because cyber insurance requires it, or there's an audit from a PCI, or the usual suspects. But what you're talking about in filling this gap is also a fundamental shift. So if you're a CISO, a CIO, a CFO, a board member staring at, hey, the problem is probably worse than I thought and getting worse every day at an increasing speed, how would you go about solving the problem? In other words, how would you evaluate different solutions in the marketplace to cut through the noise and get straight down to signal?
That's a great question. So, Eric, I'll come to that and give a more kind of direct answer, like how do you evaluate? But before that, I want to share a few things, like how do you make this project successful? How do you transform your like current pen test program or security testing program into something that stays ahead in today's world, which can stand in this like AI first world? So how do we do that transformation? What are the success criteria? Because if we have that as a clarity, then we know how to evaluate, right? So there are a few very important things. And Eric, you and I, we had this chat sometime back, and we discussed like let some fire burn. Like you can't solve everything in the world, right? And if you look at the vulnerability management, it's too many fire. Now you bring in AI and then a lot more testing, continuous testing. Like now just think, like it's now this, we were already buried, now we have more. How do we deal with it? So I believe that
with evidence, there's no plausible deniability.
Which fire should we focus on? Right? So finding that out, and interestingly, that's where again AI can solve that problem, because now you can figure out like here is this attack path that can lead to a compromise. So in that attack path, which is the most important thing. Now there are some other critical ones which are out there as well, but that's not part of any attack path which can lead to a compromise. So I can decide, okay, let me not focus on that. That's one. So it can help you to prioritize better. That's one. The second thing is like at FireCompass, what we have done is we combine the exploitation as a part of this entire chain, not just discovery of asset, not just scanning of those assets, but figuring out, can it be exploited? Giving real evidence. So we want to know which are the real ones which are exploitable. And I was talking about this particular like test which we did where this human versus AI bake-off happened, and 23 versus 2 as the score. In that, the number of false positives from the AI was 0. I was very amazed. I mean, we do see some false positives. It's very low, but this was 0, which was amazing. So you have to reduce the false positives. That's one. You have to do better prioritization. That's number 2. And so when you are looking at a solution, I would definitely consider these as very important. Like, is it adding to the noise? How does it prioritize? How many alerts will I get? Are these all evidence-backed, exploitable? That's one. The second thing is it able to find out complex attack paths? Because sometimes I can chain a medium and another medium and then get into a critical system. Or I can take a non-critical asset and have a which has a vulnerability. Through that, I can pivot and get into a critical. So the attack paths, I would definitely consider that as the second thing to kind of look at as a part of the evaluation criteria. There's another third thing, which is like, can it find complex kind of attacks? So, or in other words, like what's the false negative rate? Like we spoke about false positives, right? What's the false negative rate? You should definitely benchmark, like here's a new AI tool, whatever be their claims, that's great. Like run it and also have your existing current tools and humans test it and see what's the false positive and false negative rate. That's super, super important. That's another factor. Now, I wouldn't generally kind of take AI too seriously. For me, yes, AI is super exciting. As a technology person, I'm like super passionate about it. But at the end of the day, it's not about AI, but it's about the problem that it solves. So it's very important that we don't get driven by the AI and the AI claims, but about what problem does it solve, how well does it solve the problem. I think AI could be an interesting reason to connect, but eventually I would, during the evaluation, keep AI out of the equation and just evaluate how does it fare in terms of false positives, false negatives, prioritization, and things like that. Now, is it a real AI? I see a lot of times customers have this question. I mean, is it a real AI? My question is like, does it really matter whether it's a real AI or not? First question is, does it really solve my problem? I see most of the projects failing because we choose the wrong problem. So does it really solve my problem? And the next question is to see the effectiveness. I would not look at AI that seriously. And now if you go and ask somebody, like, what kind of AI do you use? I mean, that's a great question. If you want to understand their AI capability, if you ask them, like, what kind of AI do you use? And get an idea of the AI they use. Like, if you think about us, like, I mean, we use AI in so many different forms. Like, we also use LLMs and things like that, and that has become like the big hype today. But we use search algorithms. Like, I remember when I was in the school days, the first chapter in any AI textbook is like search. The MA star algorithm was created by one of my professors. So we use search. There's a lot of classification which is out there, which we do. There are classification algorithms. There are planning algorithms. There's classical planning algorithms which you can use. So there are so many different forms of AI which is out there. So if you are kind of engaging intellectually with the organization, you can get an idea of the kind of AI depth which they have. But for that, you need to have somebody who is deep into AI in the organization. So if you are really kind of looking at, like, I want AI as a capability and I made a board commit and board wants that and stuff like that. So I would say, like, get into a little bit in terms of, like, what's your AI about? What's under the hood? And if somebody says, hey, that's my, like, proprietary algorithm we can't share, I don't think that's a good sign. I mean, you should be able to talk about the class of algorithm without giving away your algorithm. And most of the algorithms are known to the world for last 2 decades. So that's one interesting indicator. You can try to understand that. And the other part is, if they're using AI, if they're using LLMs, understanding the guardrails, what are the safety aspects which are out there, where does data reside, all those other things are also going to come into picture. So these are probably, I don't know, maybe I spoke about 6-7 high level things which matters. One last but not the least, it's very important. I believe today is the world we are at where we need a platform approach. It's very, very important. We can't manage, unless you are a super large organization, have a lot of budget. Even they are shifting away from, like, managing 20 different products. So is there a platform approach is something which I would generally look at for anything, not just in offensive security, for anything. Because if we can make all these different things talk to each other, integrated, that's very, very powerful.
Excellent. For clarity, you brought up a question that is often asked: is this real AI? So I know for a fact that you believe in trust and transparency. In fact, the application of what the company's built, gives you deep visibility. So it kind of busts the myth of, black box, if you will, being dangerous. But point blank, binary yes, no. Is FireCompass leveraging real AI?
So here's the thing, like, what is real AI?
Well, no, I moved to that, but it's a yes no question, and I'm going to transition into some of the Q&A.
So I'll give an answer. So first of all, what is real AI? So there are so many types of AI. Like, I mean, you have search, you have planning, you have reasoning, perception, problem solving. In machine learning, you will have supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning. You have the neural networks, right? Like the RNN, CNN, and then you have the the generative models, right? The generative models became very famous, I mean, recent times. But all these AI are out there. In our platform, we use multiple of these kind of AIs. We use search, we use planning, we use reasoning, we use generative models, we use both supervised and unsupervised learning. And in different contexts, these are very, very useful. So we don't use one type of AI, we use many type of AI. If I have to do like we're doing reconnaissance and we have a huge amount of data we want to classify, I mean, why will I use LLMs for that? I will use other kind of models which are better suited for that, right? So to give you a short answer, I mean, yes, we do use, but it's not one type of AI. We use multiple types of AI depending on the problem.
Got it. So that's a hard yes in a good way. I want to transition now. First off, do you have any thoughts as we start to wrap up, or do you want to go into some of the Q&A that's online?
No, we could go to Q&A, which is online, I think.
So is the shift to autonomous agents evolutionary or disruptive? And what signals indicate we have crossed that threshold?
Great question. Definitely disruptive. Definitely disruptive. Because now you can just integrate all these tools, make these tools talk to each other, make decisions, orchestrate at scale. So it's definitely disruptive. And where are we? I believe at FireCompass, we are already there. And that means there are many other companies which would be already there. I mean, we are not the smartest people in the world. There are a lot of researchers who are working on it. And I know there are a lot of great people in the academia, in various other places who are doing a great job. So I think we are already there. Is it mainstream? No. Is it known to the entire world? No. It is probably known to less than 0.5% of the people. But it is already there. Now, if we think of it as a human being, and if we think of a human being like, suppose, like let's think of Bolt, Usain Bolt. Let's think of Bolt. Suppose Bolt is born. So
Yeah.
What's the age of Bolt? It is there. Yes, Bolt is there. But what's the age of Bolt right now? So are we there from that perspective? I would say like Bolt is born and we are probably Bolt has started running in the maybe 7-8 years or something. It's not at the prime time. We are not yet there, but Bolt has started running. We can clearly see that here's a great talented sprinter who can win Olympics.
Right.
Those who are coaching Bolt, they knew, or those who were coaching Messi, they knew when Messi was maybe 7 years old that here's a great star who is born, right? They knew, or they saw the hope and the so it's already there, and we know that is already there. For the entire world and the general population to know, it may take a little bit of time, but we are there.
Excellent, excellent. So this next question comes up all the time, and it heads over into triage world, but pen testing using AI is likely to give more false positives, ? So
Yeah,
is that true or false? And then I would add on personally, so how do you close that gap, Bakash?
That's a great question. So here's one thing that happened when we initially started to work on this. We started seeing pen tests like the agent didn't find anything, it hallucinated, created some results of its own. So it's not the regular kind of false positive. It's a very different kind of false positive. It just made things up. Not like a dash tool where it shows a false positive. So we saw things like that. But then as things evolved, now we have a system which is not like a single agent system. There's so many guardrails which are there, so many validations which are out there. We at FireCompass, we are already at a place that the false positive rate is 10 times lower than the DAST scanners. 10 times lower than the DAST scanners. So we are already there. So is it going to have less false positive or more false positives? I'm 100% sure it's going to give us way less false positives compared to any other tools we have seen. So I have kind of zero doubts on that. And things are just getting better and better. Even the traditional kind of tools which were doing testing, even they will incorporate stuff. So we have a much better, brighter future ahead for the entire industry.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I know that you've been working, and collectively we're part of a larger group working on offensive security maturity models and really better defining the offensive security programmatic approach, like actual program. I think that's going to complement a lot of different things. But there's a question in the chat here, not specific to that, but it basically just asks, is there any accreditation body for validating, certifying, and rating the AI tools? And I know Gartner has opinions and other things like that, but is there an accreditation body that's doing the work?
I don't think yet. There could be some very narrow specific areas where we might see that there are bodies. It could be like maybe in the healthcare and some very sensitive kind of use cases. These kind of things will come up first, like in automotive sector, in healthcare. We'll see these things coming up first there. And then it is also going to come up for pen testing and all, but I believe it's going to come up much later. We saw the same thing for the previous kind of tools as well. So definitely it's going to come. It's going to come up a little bit later. It has not yet happened. Is it needed? Definitely yes, it is needed. But the world is going to figure out how to do that. We still don't know how to do it. So,
right.
So it's an evolution. Is going to happen. It has not yet happened.
Right. I mean, looking for those measuring sticks so that we can manage it properly and apply the technology is going to be very important. An add-on question from the disruption question. Same person asked another great question. How should organizations audit and log decisions made by autonomous offensive agents for accountability?
That's a great question. So I'll tell you our approach, what we do. We give you the full log of what the AI thought and what the AI did. You get the full logs. Now the question is, this is a great thing. Like earlier, if there was a pen tester, you gave somebody this project to do pen testing, you could never look into that person's head. What is the person thinking? You also don't get the logs of what was that person doing. They'll not give you those. They'll just give you the outcome, right? So in the past, it was not even possible to do that. But now with AI and the way we are approaching, you have the complete visibility. You will have the visibility. Now, the next question comes is, how do I analyze, right? So for analysis, like right now, what people do is like, they're very curious. They go and see what it thought. Like people will do things manually, but eventually, if you have to analyze, you will need another AI system to do that. So I believe in the long run, the model is about like, we have many AI models, one validating the another. We have a maker, we have a checker. That's how it's going to be very much like the human world. So that's going to happen. So today we give all this transparency at FireCompass. You get access to all of those. Right now, people will do more like a human approach to look at it. You can retain those logs. In the future, I believe there will be tools which will do it.
Excellent. Excellent. So I've got one more question that I wanted to ask. How do you think AI versus machine learning technologies can be best applied in offensive security to maximize the relative strengths and minimize weaknesses? I think that this is also in the context of something that you touched on. Like, what is the role of the human moving forward? If you think of that. So I expanded the question a little bit, but I thought it would be a good topic for us to end this on. And then you can provide your closing thoughts. And
so again, I would approach this problem not as AI and machine learning problem. I would look at it more as solving the problem which we have at hand. Like, let's imagine like you are part of an organization, you have to do a transformation of your security testing program. And why do you want the transformation? Because in today's world, things are moving much faster. Attackers are much faster. Their speed, scale, and sophistication is very high. You want to match up to that. Suppose that's one goal. You may have another goal from the board. Use AI and give me 10x more efficiency. That could be another goal. So you may have different reasons to transform your security testing program. That could be because of a board efficiency mandate. That could be because of your risk management mandate, that I want to shorten the risk window. I don't want to wait for my yearly pen test. I want to bring it down to 1 or 2 days, that risk window of finding exploitable paths. I want to increase the scope to 100% of the assets, not just like 20% most important. So you have defined your goal. Now, once you have defined the goal, now let's look at how do we achieve that. And also very important, you have to look at all the stack. It can't be just network or application. So you look at the human, network, application, look at external, internal. So now you have defined a goal, and then what you do is you build a program. Like, okay, this is what we are able to do today. This is where we want to go. Now, for your transformation journey, now you need to think like, I would say don't think tools in today's world. I mean, there are enough platforms that we don't need to think tools. So you now need to think like, okay, which are these 2 or 3 platforms, if we can bring it together, I can solve this entire problem holistically. And how, with my same team size, or maybe I increase my team size by 2x, but in return, I get 50x more outcome. That should be the goal. Now, if you set up that as a goal, then you build the stack. You decide, okay, if I imagine like I have a metrics, I have all this tech stack, these are the goals which I have, which are the platforms which solves what, and we create that minimum kind of a viable number of platforms and that minimum viable number of people to do that program transformation. So I would look at it more from that perspective and leverage AI as a tool. A lot of times, like we get fascinated by the hammer and we start looking for a nail, or we think of anything as a nail. So I believe it has become much easier and much more cost effective to achieve that goal using AI. So look at AI more as a means and not so much as a goal, and stay focused on the goal, which is your program transformation. So the answer was slightly different, but that's what I believe in.
Hopefully that satisfies. I know it's not a two-way conversation, but we're trying to make sure we answer any of the live questions. Well, as we finish up here, what words of wisdom do you want to leave everybody with? And we started on this AI shift journey, talked about myths, talked about gaps, talked about how we close them, how to work with, or how Fire Compass works. Do you have any type of call to action or request for input, or how do you want to wrap things up, Akash?
Okay, I'll go in a slightly different angle. Might be like the life of a security person is actually very stressful. I mean, you have to always deal with fire, and you're continuously handling all these challenges. So I would say that in this phase of where the world is changing, it's very important to look inward and look at ourselves and think of our mind and spend some time on that. So that could mean a holistic well-being of ourselves, which could be stress management, which could be happiness, which could be great sleep, thinking of our holistic well-being. I would say that is something which is very, very important for the entire cybersecurity community. And I know there are a lot of people who are very much conscious about it. So I know this is completely off the topic of pen testing and things like that, because at the end of the day, this is something very important. We realize that whatever we do, we can never be 100% safe. So we have to deal with this this world. We had been dealing with it throughout. Now this is going to be more exciting. So I think taking care of ourselves from that perspective is probably one of the things which just came to my mind.
No. I really appreciate that perspective, and I know we're right at time, so I want to be respectful of everyone. Thank you all for joining. Bakash, thank you for your perspectives and insights here, and hope you can join us next time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.